In this cut section of a typical multi-stage centrifugal compressor, you have two journal bearings located at both ends of the shaft, and one thrust bearing located at the shaft end on the non-driven side, as depicted here. The configuration and number of bearings depend on the compressor design and process condition, as we will see further ahead. Bearings are used to support the compressor shaft with a minimum of friction. Bearings allow the shaft to rotate about its axis while restricting axial and radial motions of the shaft. Now, an unsupported shaft can move in any of the three ways as depicted here: rotation about the axis, movement along the axis, also called axial motion, and rotation off-center, also called radial motion. In a centrifugal compressor or in any other rotating equipment, the shaft must be free to rotate, but should not move in any other way. There are forces in the compressor that tend to make axial and radial motion of the shaft. These forces will be covered in a later section. Thrust bearings are used to restrict the axial motion of the shaft while allowing it to rotate with minimum friction. Journal bearings are used to restrict the radial motion of the shaft while allowing it to rotate with minimum friction. In the next couple of videos, we'll cover in detail the type, design, and operating principles of journal and thrust bearings. Journal bearings are used to restrict the radial motion of the shaft while allowing it to rotate with minimum friction. The figure that you can see here shows a plain journal bearing used to prevent radial motion of the shaft. The babbitt surface highlighted here is a low friction metal and is lubricated by a film of oil. The oil is supplied to the bearing under pressure through grooves on the bearing surface. Oil pressure ensures sufficient flow to prevent overheating. This next figure shows another type of journal bearings. It's called tilting pad journal bearing. These bearings are designed for high speeds and shaft stabilization. They include a tilting shoe or a pad, a tilting shoe pivot or pad pivot, and a babbitt lining. The shoes are positioned by cylindrical grooves in the retaining ring, as seen here. The back of the shoes are machined cylindrically for a free fit in these grooves, and therefore ensuring a good tilting shoe action, as depicted in this simplified animation. In a plain journal bearing, the shaft and the journal tend to make a line contact, and this can lead to improper lubrication and wear of this part of the shaft. In the tilting pad bearing, as the shaft speed increases, the pads tilt as shown, and the oil becomes trapped in between wedges created in between the shaft and the pads. The pressurized flow of oil along the wedge maintains a fine film of lubrication in between the shaft and the bearing pads. Now, what I want you to remember and to keep in mind from our discussion is that most compressors use hydrodynamic bearings, as seen here, which support the rotor with a thin film oil wedge. Small compressors, however, like fans or blowers, sometimes use anti-friction bearings, or ball bearings, as seen here. But regardless of the type of bearing, the basic principle in bearing design is as follows. The pressure is equal to the forces divided by the area, where the pressure expressed in psi is the pressure on the bearing oil film that results from all the rotor forces, static or dynamic, acting on the bearing area. If the forces are too large, or if the bearing area is too small, the pressure load will become excessive and the bearing will fail. Thrust bearings are used to restrict the axial motion of the shaft while allowing it to rotate with minimum friction. The figure that you can see here depicts a standard thrust bearing, and here its corresponding cut section. In the thrust bearing, the shaft is restricted to move in the axial direction, but is free to rotate and move radially. The thrust collar is machined as a part of the shaft, or can be securely fit to the shaft on a sleeve and rotates along with the shaft. The thrust shoes are stationary. The shoes acts against the collar, therefore preventing axial motion of the shaft. High pressurized oil is injected as seen here to ensure a thin film of lubrication between the collar and the shoes. This is done to reduce the friction and dissipate the heat. The following figure shows a combined journal and thrust bearing with the thrust collar and thrust shoes. Now, the same principle applies in the design of thrust bearing. That is, the pressure equals all the rotor axial forces acting on the thrust bearing area. Recall, the thrust bearing supports all compressor axial loads. For any hydrodynamic bearing, journal or thrust, the approximate pressure that would cause a bearing failure is 500 psi. Most industry specifications limit the load pressure to 50% of this value, so roughly around 250 psi. However, in many thrust bearing applications, it is not possible to provide sufficient bearing area to maintain the load pressure at 250 psi. In these cases, a thrust balancing system is needed to reduce the thrust load. Let's see how these systems work. You can see here a cut section of a typical centrifugal compressor with the impeller, the rotating shaft, the mechanical seal, the journal bearing, and the thrust bearing. The balance system includes the balance drum, the balance seal, the balance chamber, and a balance line which usually runs from the balance chamber to the compressor section. The balance system reduces thrust by providing a thrust force which counteracts the total impeller thrust force, therefore reducing the thrust bearing load. This is done by designing the face dimensions of the balance drum for sufficient area to provide the desired force for the differential pressure P2 minus P1 across the balance drum. Therefore, the balance force is calculated by the following formula. It is equal to the differential pressure across the balance drum times the balance drum area. Now, since the total impeller thrust is equal to the sum of the individual impeller thrusts, then the total thrust load exerted on the thrust bearing is determined by the following formula. You can see now that the balancing system has reduced the total thrust load. It reduces the thrust by providing a thrust force which counteracts the total impeller thrust force, therefore reducing the total thrust bearing load. Now back to our balance line. This line runs from the balance chamber to the compressor section and maintains the balance chamber pressure at P1 plus the balance line dP. An effective method of balance drum condition monitoring is to monitor balance drum dP, and increasing dP at the same operating point will indicate increased balance drum clearance. Often, thrust bearing failures are caused by balance seal wear. So, monitoring balance line dP will indicate the root cause of a thrust bearing failure in this case. Finally, before to finish off this video, I would like to mention some other important facts concerning thrust balance. First, thrust can be balanced to any value: zero thrust, toward section, or toward discharge. Then, active thrust direction is the direction the rotor thrusts at rated conditions. And finally, thrust position is a function of performance and will change with flow rate, speed, and gas density.